Hi, everyone. Welcome back to A Billion Realities. This is Jessica. Today we have writer-director James Moran on the show speaking about his fight against the deletion of Holocaust history in school books in his state, which interestingly led him to the creation of his powerful film, Operation Resist. Hi, James. Are you there? Hello, hello. Sorry, guys. We're just waiting for James to connect. James, do we have you on the line? Hi,
Hello?
James. Can you hear
Hey,
me?
can you hear me now? Yes, I can
Yes,
hear
I
you fine.
can. Okay,
Good.
great.
I'm not sure what's
Sorry,
going on,
audience.
but
We had some troubles connecting today, but we're good now. So welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
indeed. Can you hear me, Jessica?
I can hear you okay, yeah. It sounds like your
Okay.
connection's a little bit rough. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll make it work. Sometimes it's a little rough starting out, so sorry about that, guys, but it does happen. But usually it does get better as we go for some reason. So hopefully we'll have a strong enough connection to get through the show clearly. So where are you located, James?
I'm actually in the Carolinas here in the United States, and basically above the Atlanta area, which is quickly becoming the new capital for movies in the U.S.
Absolutely. So you have such an interesting story, and I know that it started out with you taking a stand against the deletion of the Holocaust history. I did introduce that to the audience before we got you on live, so they're up to speed on that. But I would love for you to tell the audience how you got involved. How did you first hear about the deletion of the Holocaust history, and what was the first steps? What were the first steps that you took in order to take a stand against that?
Okay. Okay, so the first thing that the first time I heard this was I was in a restaurant downtown, and the lady there told me she was inside the school system, and this was in South Carolina, and she said they're getting ready to take the Holocaust out of the school textbooks, and I said, wow, and at that moment I was thinking about what I was going to make as far as a film, and I've been looking kind of for a good topic to write about. And when she said that, I said, that's my topic. And I immediately went to work. I wrote the script in January of 2018. And I filmed it in June, July of 2018. And then we released it in 2019.
Wow. So what was your active role prior to making the film in fighting against that deletion of the history in the books?
It had not even come out to the public yet, I do not believe. And that was December of 2017. So I literally wrote the script the next month after hearing about it. So
wow.
I immediately I went immediately to the movies and fought that way because I knew there's a lot of people who would be fighting at the grassroots level and other levels, including I know my friend was definitely heavily against that because she said she used that to teach her kids about bullying, and she had some insight into that, and I tend to try to protect her because she's still in the system, still working to fight hard to keep the voice of history alive. So
Absolutely. So what were some of the emotions that came over you initially hearing about the plan to delete the history of the Holocaust?
the first question is why? Why would we delete our history? So,
Yeah, of course.
And as a part of that, once you answer that question, that a million will follow, which is, are we to forget history? Because if we forget, then this can happen again. So that's the whole never forget and never again.
That's a great point, and that's exactly what I thought of. It's almost like you're hiding part of history, which by covering it up, it almost makes it easier for something like that to happen again. And that's exactly why we need to know what, history repeats itself. So, it makes you wonder if there's a deeper reason why they wanted to delete that. So I guess that was the driving force then behind you wanting to get involved so heavily in the fight against that?
That's correct. Absolutely right. Fighting to keep history
Amazing.
alive. Very important.
Absolutely. So what were some of the steps that you had to take initially to get involved? Obviously, you started your film, but was there more was there more behind the scenes that you had to do to present this or like fight against the state on this issue?
Yeah, so one of the things I did was some research as well while I was writing. So there's a very fast month, right, of writing. And part of that was a Newsweek article where they actually outlined what South Carolina was doing to get rid of the Holocaust from its schools. And the more I delved into it, the more I began to realize how many layers there were down deep within, embedded in our society in that state, which was within even people who were working in the government, obviously, because they're the ones working to get it out of the school textbooks. And one interesting story was when I was working to get a Kugelwagen, which is a German Jeep from 1943, to use in our movie. A certain gentleman who was in a government position had said that he would get that for me, but as we got closer to the date, he said, call him. So I did. I followed up with him. He said, okay, great. He said, by the way, you're a Nazi, right? And I just stopped like cold, and I said, no. And it dawned on me, this guy thought I was doing this for the Nazis. And then he did not want to let me use his Kugelwagen Jeep. And I began to realize how deeply embedded in South Carolina a lot of this racism and hate was, which explained, it took them quite a while just to get over the whole Civil War thing. And we all know that was in the news not too long ago. So it's a real deeply entrenched animosity, I think, in some ways for certain people who hold on to these kind of old traditional beliefs of, somehow one ethnicity is better than another and those type of things, which is obviously not very helpful to society.
Absolutely, that's shocking. I can't believe what you just told me. That's insane. Actually, you think that we're more evolved on a general scale to a certain extent in the U.S., but there's still so much racism, actually, and that's just proof of how, like you said, how deeply embedded it is, and it's very concerning. So I think it's amazing just what you've done with all of that and your stand and your film, your stand against that and your film revolving around that topic. So let me ask you this. What were some of the ups and downs of that journey? I mean, obviously that was a really great example of you realizing how racist some of the people still are down south. I'm sure everywhere, but I have heard like down south it's still quite an issue in some areas. But yeah, what were some of the ups and downs of the journey along the way?
Well, I think there were a lot of ups and downs, and whether it be based upon more the political side or whether it be based upon the just logistics of it, you had a lot of challenges. It's kind of like I'd hit what I would call a Red Sea, and I'd be like, what next? I'd look up and go, hey, how are we going to do this? And then the door would just open. And one example of that would be the cars. We have these old-timey cars, and of course, I'm trying to acquire them here in the Carolinas, which is a little more difficult than Los Angeles, right? And
Yes.
I get someone who says, hey, no problem, you can use the cars, etc. So come down to the week of the actual shoot, and there's a lot of issues that suddenly start popping up with people who are not used to working as much with, the LA film community and that type of thing. So we had to kind of adjust to that. He said, hey, we've got this vehicle that we can't seem to get fixed, and this other one has got the door locked, and my mechanic just walked off on me, and we don't know where the key is. All this happening in 1 week. And then, so I said, hey, no problem. We're just going to change. We're going to move to different cars. They're not maybe particularly the ones I wanted as far as era look, right? But they look old. They will do what we need to do. So we hopped over and began to work on those vehicles, getting those in line to be taken out to us. I changed my schedule around so that the shoot schedule could have the cars at a different time later in the week. And then on the day of actually shooting, and when he was supposed to be bringing them out, he said, oh, by the way, he said, we don't have license plates for these cars. I sat there and I stared at my screen. I said, I'll call you back in just a minute. So I stared at my screen. I looked at, on my screen was a map of all the different roads in South Carolina. And I knew I'd talked with a SWAT member of Spartanburg, who actually was a member of my cast. And we had already determined ahead of time some of the possible locations. And one of them was a private road owned by the county, which we knew we could shoot on. So I thought, you know what, we'll go on the private road. We'll be able to use these license plates. We'll be able to tow these vehicles without license plates to that private road, and we'll still be able to shoot these chase scenes. So that's what we did, and it worked. So that's one of the logistical challenges. Yeah.
Did it have any effect on your personal life? Because I know it's a pretty heavy topic, and, you have people in government who are pushing for this to, obviously outside the film, but are pushing for the deletion of this. I'm really interested in hearing what the fight was like against that. How was the decision overturned?
Well, I had someone very, very close to me, and who walked out on me. Without going into the details on that, they were not happy with with the Holocaust film. I also had a number of people who I knew were they seemed to be trying to shut me out. And I won't say media, but a lot of people in South Carolina, they're very supportive of the powers that be, so to speak, in the state. And it was really hard to get any type of local media. It was kind of entrenched, and I kind of felt that. Yeah. And I literally talked to one of the main guys who's won awards and everything, and he was very friendly off the books with me. But it's just a lot of politics. And as you guessed, I had a Los Angeles executive in Hollywood call me. He said, James, he said, it's pretty ballsy of you to actually make a Holocaust film in South Carolina. So there's word out on the street, I guess. But yeah, so
wow.
He's the guy who he helped to launch 2 of the major networks. But that's funny because Charlie Kirk, who is a political pundit on the very conservative side, right, even said in one of his videos online I saw, he said that it was well known that South Carolina was the most racist state in America, which, hey, I hope that's not the case, but, it did give me some indication as to why, having grown up, by the way, all my life in the Carolinas, so I'm not an outsider coming and criticizing, right? But
of course, right.
I had never seen this side of the planet, so to speak, of this side of these states, and specifically out of South Carolina. So that was quite interesting for me, quite eye-opening. And I think that's important because I think a lot of people out there who maybe like I was for a lot of my life may think, oh, everyone's just like what I think they are. Joe, he goes down to church, and he's a good guy, and he would never hate another race. Well, do you know the government official I mentioned earlier regarding the Kugelwagen Jeep? He actually told me, he said, well, I won't be able to help you out. And he said, I have to go to church. I said, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's
What
rich,
happened to
right?
love
So
thy neighbor? Yeah.
thank you, right? Like that's far more
Wow.
important than going to church is loving your neighbor, right? So yeah, so I don't
But,
get exactly.
keeping up appearances.
Yeah, it sounds like an old BBC comedy show, right? Keeping up appearances, but
For
there's really a lot
real.
of right. So yeah, so it's a
Wow.
it very eye-opening experience to do a humanitarian film. Indeed, you start realizing
I
how society
bet.
really works.
Yeah. So the person who walked out on you, and I know you don't want to go into too much detail, but the person unhappy with the content of the film as well? Or was that a more personal situation?
Yeah, for legal reasons, I don't want to get too far into that for fear I might say something
Okay.
that I'll regret.
I see.
So,
No worries. We'll
yeah.
skip right over that. But it sounds like a lot of people had some pretty major issues with obviously the content that you had created and your stance against this. And it's just shocking. But, unfortunately, racism still does exist. It's so unevolved and, it's so shocking to a person who loves everybody equally, truly, and
Oh, absolutely.
it's just unreal. Yeah. But it does exist. We see it. We still do see it. So how long was the journey from start to finish from when you first found out about the deletion of this history from a month later when you started writing your film? How long was the whole journey until the film was complete?
Well, that's a good question. I started writing it in January of 2018, as I mentioned. Finished filming it in July. We finished the last filming in July. And then the post-production side began. I flew out to Los Angeles. I hung out there with distribution agents and so forth, getting it prepped for the distribution of it. Went to the American film market out in Santa Monica and was able to shake hands with a lot of guys who are considered movers shakers, so to speak, in that arena.
Right.
So came back to the Carolinas, began to work on all the different aspects from, the after effects and the special effects and the sound and all the rest of it that had to come together, cataloging and so all that initial work. Meanwhile, I was told by a gentleman who had actually worked within the film he was a military historian. He was also doing one of the parts in it, bringing authenticity to one of the military roles. He was a colonel playing a colonel in the OSS, which is the pre-CIA spies. And he actually was instrumental in working as a liaison with us with the Dutch embassy in Washington, D.C., who found out we had 10 Dutch saviors being highlighted in our movie, people who had helped other people out right during the whole Nazi regime. And they actually invited us up there to show the movie as a premiere. So it was absolutely incredible. And then one of the people who I'd mentioned previously, without getting into details, stole the hard drive. We had to go through a lot of interesting stuff. It basically happened just before our approval with the embassy. And then other things they did thereafter, just 2 to 3 days before the premiere, also was very damaging. So in the end, we ended up having to postpone the entire premiere out to a different time. We couldn't even go up to Washington, D.C. to do that, but we still had a gathering in D.C. of people just as a friendship between the Dutch and the USA. But we had to actually premiere it later due to all the, what's a nice way, histrionics that were taking place. It was just absolutely incredible. Welcome to humanitarian filming.
Wow. So was that your first mission work, project, or have you worked on, humanitarian efforts before?
I would say this is my real first mission kind of film that I've done. I don't want it to be my last just because of this experience. But what I will say is that I've learned tremendously about the cost, let's put it, the cost of standing up for other human beings and to speak out and make a difference. There is a cost to it, and it is worth every bit of the cost.
It's amazing to hear you say that because you go through the most when you are standing up for a cause, right? And when you're defending others and doing what's right. And that usually brings on the most trials and tribulations. But you still walk out of it feeling rewarded. Like it's a rewarding feeling and it's worth it. So it's amazing to hear you say that, you know. I love that.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So how did you get funded? I mean, that's one of the hardest things in this industry. And I'm just going to ask that because all of that happens so fast. Like, it's very rare for that process to happen that quickly, from writing until filming until release, you know? So how did you go about that? It's just a really tough thing to get.
It's another one of those little miracles that happen. And speaking of which, I've actually thought about writing a book about this, about all the different things that came together and the challenges. It was like it was sort of the gargantuan miracles and challenges, both hitting each other, like Godzilla and King Kong going at it, right? So it was amazing. But one of the things we had was we actually had set up a fund. I personally actually had a fund set up, and I used that fund for years to help out people. And I don't like to highlight that kind of aspect. You know, I try to always kind of do that, you know, off the record, but just trying to help people out who are struggling. And, you know, a gentleman who's trying to get into law enforcement, for example, needs help. We're out there trying to help him out. And the vehicle breaks down. You follow me. The things of life happen, and people need help. So what had happened was I had this fund. It had started to gather up a good amount of money. And I had been thinking, what am I going to do? What kind of cause can I put this to? And I did not even associate it with this film because this film had not even transpired in my head yet, right? And I typically had never, ever used it for films, just used it for individuals. So when that topic popped up, I said, I've got to do something about it. I started writing January. At the end of January, I started working on logistics of how, you know, we would do that. And I thought to myself around that time, you know, how are we going to fund this? And I thought, that fund, it's sitting there. So it was already sitting there waiting to be used to help out mankind. And sure enough, it worked. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's kind of neat that, you know, humanitarian efforts kind of came together with the filming humanitarian efforts all at once. So.
Well, absolutely, and film is such a powerful way to, you know, get a message across. And I did the same thing with my film, which was on the opioid crisis. It was a drama, but you know, it revolved around 16-year-olds. And anyway, the message was there. So you know, film is such a great way to, you know, emotion and inspire a certain feeling, and also to educate people. So I think it's amazing that you ended up having that funding for that reason, because what better way to get a message across to the masses? So that's amazing. So where did you guys end up? So you filmed the entire thing in South Carolina?
Yes, we filmed it all in, South Carolina and North Carolina. So all in the Carolinas. We didn't go outside of the Carolinas. Yeah, so we shot some of the mountain stuff in North Carolina. We shot pretty much everything else in small towns in South Carolina. So we used the old historic-looking towns they already had to create this kind of a Netherlands look. And some of the old memorial-type stuff, like the old train stations and so forth, we were able to utilize as well.
That's amazing. Excellent. So how did you decide on the storyline for the film as you were writing it?
Okay, so the storyline came to me, funny enough, while I was doing some stuff in my house, and as I was working on it, it's funny, this whole plot just started coming to my head, and it started just kind of like this intertwining kind of thing of the basic hero aims for a chief desire, which if you've seen the Tools of Screenwriting, Michael Howard, who basically reused the old Ed Mabley textbook that LA used a lot, right? So that book has a really good picture of how you have this chief hero who is headed for a very, very important desire, and then in between are all these conflicts they have to overcome. So to throw that into my movie without giving too much away,
right.
I would say that the basic gist of that is we have this Jewish girl. Her family is raided by these Nazi fascists in the Netherlands, and they're fighting just to be able to eat because of ration cards. And as a part of that, they actually have she has to flee the country to get out of there. And without saying what happened to other family members, you'll learn in the movie, she has to find a way through the resistance movement who help move her along to create a plan for her to get out through their kind of secret workings out of the country. And that's pretty much the main goal is, of course, to get her out of the country. And that's where you have the hero, the main passion, and then the conflicts in between, of course, what drive the movie.
Wow, that's incredible. So when this movie was released, what was the reaction of those people who were pro-deletion of Holocaust history? That must have been interesting.
Yeah, I didn't hear a lot from them, to be honest with you, and I didn't expect to hear a lot from them. I did have one person who I had a feeling was there just to deride at the premiere, that is. But at the premiere, there wasn't a whole lot of response. However, thereafter, there was online. And people began to go out to the movie's website, out on Amazon.com, and begin to make these just awful remarks. And you knew they sounded, just like they hadn't even seen the movie. And we also knew that we actually knew the names of some of the people. So we knew that there were some of the haters.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they were beginning to put just one star, driving our rating down. When we first were released, for example, the month thereafter, our movie and Nick Cage's movie were almost neck and neck, except we had more customer reviews and we also had higher ratings. And then after the haters got involved, it literally just dropped down about a full point. So,
that's
just part
what they do.
Yeah, and you get it. Like these humanitarian efforts, this is part of the cost again. It's just part of the cost. So you just have to know that.
It is. Absolutely. That's a great message to send out. I'm not surprised, I've seen that happen before. That's why I was curious. It's, like you said, humanitarian, efforts. And I know how much of an issue it was in that town to begin with, just by the fact that you had to fight against the deletion of this history says a lot, because that's just mind-blowing that would ever be taken out. Yeah.
Agreed. You've got it. Exactly. Yeah. So why are we even fighting over this, right? It's like, if in fact I even have to even just, but yeah, so, and you get it from your opioid movie, because I'm sure that you had people on the political side of that who wanted to it's all about money a lot of times. And in the case of mine, it's about just hate, which is totally insane, but yeah.
Well, yeah, you have the mainstream, some of the medical community or pain clinics who are pro opiates, they're like, well, people need it. And it's kind of like, you face that type of, I guess it's adversity in a way. There's always opposing sides to an argument, and then I had a lot of people even fighting about like methadone clinics, and it just became a whole other beast in a way, you know what I mean? But, it is what it is. Yeah. We gotta fight for the things that we feel passionate about, and we feel they ignite a fire in our soul for a reason, and that's because we're meant to do something, and that's what I believe. And this is obviously something that sparked your soul right away, and you were already writing about it a month later, right? So you're the perfect example of that. Yeah. Do you feel like there's a risk of this happening again in the future of the deletion of the Holocaust history? Or do you think this is, it's going to stop here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's going to happen again and again. And as they've said before about freedom is all about vigilance, right? And the price is often in blood. So you're always going to have to be fighting for freedom. You're always going to be having to fight for love. The good things in the universe, you always have to be working hard at fighting for them. I mean, even law and order to a great degree, because chaos and hate and all of the bad things of life will always take over like weeds in the garden.
Right. You're so right. That's a really great point to make. Would you be down again, to go through the fight again?
Yes, I would actually. I don't know how soon I will be, but yeah. In fact, a lot of times, you have to take breaks from the humanitarian films to recover. I mean, right, so that you can afford to do them again, because that's the whole point, to keep trying. But yeah, I've got more. You do too. I know we both have many ideas to try to help mankind, to help humanity, and to do our part as humanitarians. And I think it's very important. And I think we have to think of the purposes of our life as making more than just a paycheck, but of making a difference. And thinking that it takes teamwork. A lot of us in the film community working together to make that difference. And we got to think through how do we do that so we're not completely destroying ourselves. And that is, I think we have to entertain at some point and, build our presence and build our financial stability. But then at the same time, realizing our purpose in the end is to use that influence that we have and the even financial prosperity that we have to turn around and also make a difference for other people. So I think that's very, very important.
Wow. You hit that right on, it's really, the way that you just described that is absolutely like the story of my life, I would have to say. It's like I make something and then I put it back in. I put it back into my passion projects, right? And then obviously I have to build back up again, but it's not just financial, it's even more so spiritual, because you need to rejuvenate and build back up, build your strength back up. So I totally understand what you're saying when it comes to finding the balance. And I also love what you're saying about not just getting that paycheck, but more so building a legacy, leaving behind your legacy. So it is so much more than, hey, I'm successful in this or that, or, I'm making such and such amount of money. It's more so like, what kind of legacy did I leave behind? Who did I help? Did I make an impact? So you're definitely on the right track, and I think it's just I'm sure so many people are amazed at what you've already done and what you're still doing. So was that your first film project, or had you already been involved in the film industry before?
I've been involved in the film industry before, made a feature film before, but I had spent a lot of time in other things as well, IT operations. I worked in global commercial for a very, very large bank. And part of my job there was working cross-border relations with countries like Russia and Indonesia, as well as working and leading teams on the IT side for Latin America, Middle East, Africa, Asia, Canada, that type of thing. So that was kind of a very good way to be exposed to culture, different thoughts, different ideas. Even when you order food in those environments, you got to be careful what everyone likes and their beliefs religiously. And the beautiful part of my film was I literally had people from all types of belief systems and political backgrounds all working together on this film to say, basically, share the love your neighbor, stop the hate, be kind to one another, and to really focus on when the fascists come, when these people come who hate and they're trying to hurt your neighbor, always resist them. Don't let them kill your neighbor. And if they're taking away your neighbors to kill them, you stand up for your neighbor. That's your duty. And that's kind of the real big, big message that's preached there. And it addresses, for example, the religious community in Nazi Germany, who pretty much all stood with Hitler. And it was a way of saying, look, before you start wagging your finger at Germany, look at the environment, look what was being said, look how people were buying into this, and make sure you're not guilty yourself in the future, because it's easier than you think. I think when we forget love is our purpose and we start just listening to a man, and Hitler was inspiring, right? He was up there just yelling and saying things that everyone wanted to hear about the economy. And it's so easy for people to get inspired by that and forget their fellow man and realize that the more important thing is love, and that we got to capture love first. And all of this thing about political parties and being having allegiance to a single person, that's not as important. So.
Absolutely. That's such a great point and such a great reminder, especially under the current circumstances. With coronavirus, people are getting pretty crazy out there. Sorry to say it, but it's not the same here, but you see people fighting over things in the store, and it's just so crazy because, I live in Serbia for the last 7.5 years, and people literally help each other here. They've been through enough wars to know better. And they really look out for each other. They give each other, they trade things. One person grows this, the other one has some eggs, they trade. It's really very different. And I'm not saying that that mentality doesn't exist in the U.S., but in general, there's a lot of people who are definitely not looking out for each other either. I do think there's both, because I know a lot of amazing people. I'm from there, right? I'm from New York. But when you see people in the cities who don't know their neighbors, it's like they almost have no empathy, buying things up at the stores and fighting over it. It's just the opposite of how it should be. So I think that your message comes at a really relevant time. It's always a relevant topic, but even under the current circumstances, it's definitely relevant. So as a humanitarian, what are your top, what are the things that pull at your heartstrings the most? I mean, I'm sure that, love thy neighbor, right? That's what we discuss, and stopping the hate. But what are some other similar topics that you really feel very passionate about?
Well, I think the bottom core of almost everything is what are the big things in life that really are what defines love, right? How do you define love? And I think in the sense that the old adage which we're pulling from is the old love God, love your neighbor kind of a thing, right? That's the old adage that has been very much used and very much seen for many years, for millennia, really. And a lot of people see it different ways. But I think what we've learned in history is that whenever someone decides that their way is such the way that they need to annihilate everyone around them, then that gets a little bit scary. And I think we see that in the Crusades and the Inquisitions, and we see that in the Holocaust. We see it in a lot of different areas. And even today, you have genocides, and you have people who think that, it may not be a religious belief. It may be a political belief. It may be, and I think it all comes down to ego. I think someone thinks my idea is so great. And we as artists understand this. Like, if someone comes up and you just made this great painting or this great piece of artwork or songs or, a film, and you've got your ego attached to it, right? And they just laugh at it and make fun of it. It's very hurtful. That can injure a person's ego. Well, I think there's the opposite too, where there's a narcissist, someone who has no conscience. They think they're like God. They think whenever they say something, everyone should bow. And when you don't, it's very frightening, because they can use their force in office or whatever to suddenly begin to pound their thoughts and their beliefs on everyone else. And that gets very dangerous. So.
Absolutely, especially considering the fact that narcissists literally don't feel empathy for other human beings. They just don't. That part of their brain has been shut down, from a traumatic event. So, yeah. What's even scarier is, there's some of them are sociopaths and actual psychopaths, and that's even worse because, a narcissist, there's still sometimes, every now and then, in some of them, where the good that's true because narcissists aren't born; they're created, right? And they go through either neglect or abusive circumstances that shuts down the empathetic part of their brain. But, there's really no hope for sociopaths and psychopaths. And a lot of the people who are running, in the government, let's say, I don't want to say too much about that, but a lot of them are psychopaths. and, unfortunately, they're the ones who are controlling everything that goes on in our society. And they're power-driven. Beyond money-driven, they're power-driven. So that's what I've realized in doing my digging and my research, But, yeah.
Absolutely. One of the things that you touched on there was you said that there's a lot of psychopaths and a lot of sociopaths in government. So they tend to be very, very, they're so very narcissistic, like godlike, that they're very convincing. They come across as authoritarian about things that they know nothing of, but they sound like they know everything, right?
Absolutely.
I think it's because they believe in themselves so much that when they speak, it sounds so authoritarian that everyone just go, wow, this person knows what they're talking about. And everyone's looking for that, like someone who actually knows what the story is. And when this person sounds so very like, I've got the answer, they're just like, man, this guy's good, right? Let's follow him. And the sad thing is, like you said, they have absolutely no feeling at all for anyone. And they're all about themselves, and their ideas usually are all about themselves, nothing to do with helping mankind.
Absolutely. It's completely power-driven, ego-driven supply. And that's what it's called with narcissists. Like, they feed off of that attention. But the thing about narcissists is they can come off so well, and these are extreme narcissists that I'm talking about. Some are not as extreme. There's definitely a spectrum. But an extreme narcissist like that is probably a borderline sociopath, but they study other people's behavior. So they will study other behaviors and those behaviors' effects on others so that they know how to be convincing. They'll study that for years. So they absolutely know how to be convincing. And they also know that the more confident they are, that gives them that type of power. So they literally practice that confidence and that knowing what they're talking about and studying human behavior. They're master manipulators. So you hit it bang on. I deal with a lot of those topics because I'm certified in hypnosis and NLP and had to learn a lot about psychology and personality disorders. And yeah, it's scary. The abuse that those type of people carry out in their day-to-day life is already bad enough. But put them in a power position, and that's when things get really scary. Look at Hitler.
There you go.
There's a great saying that Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, and I've seen that up close and personal the past year and a half. Very, very up close and personal. The narcissistic, that whole thing, that whole world. In fact, I never really, we all know about narcissism and so forth in kind of passing, but I know that you know it quite well because of your studies, but I never really knew it as well as I now know it until this past year and a half or so, because you begin to experience that from people, and you begin to realize they have zero conscience, like zero. And they don't even, and here's the scary part too, because you mentioned some scary parts of it all. Here's the scary part is they don't even see who they really are.
No.
They don't realize
they're
even wrong.
Yeah,
That's right.
You're absolutely correct. They have no ability to self-reflect. They just don't.
Correct.
Because their fragile ego underneath it all cannot ever admit to making mistakes, to not being perfect, they cannot take responsibility for their actions. They can't feel empathy for hurting you because it just doesn't exist for them. So it's a pretty major sickness. It's a major sickness. It's a personality disorder. Terrifying.
And you're right. They're usually from some type of a trauma or abuse in the background. I see that over and again. You're absolutely right about it. But it's how you react to that. Like, just because someone's been traumatized or abused doesn't mean they can't brush themselves off, learn to be stronger and move forward in spite of
Mhm.
that. But a lot of people tend to play victim status, and they do want to become a victim over and over from others that aren't even victimizing them, and they use that to draw in people, and then then it's like the little monster comes out, right? And then here I am telling everyone what to do, as we saw in Adolf Hitler,
Mhm.
and that feeds that. And we see it in another important thing to make sure the audience understands is I'm very nonpartisan. Like, I'm not into that. Some people think, it's all because you're in this party, and they're probably guessing me into one or the other parties. They have no idea what my beliefs are. The truth is I'm friends with people from all the parties, and I'm also hated probably by a number of people from both parties because,
Right.
right? Because when you stand up and you say, let's love each other, there's people who make money, first of all, and you know how rich that could be, enriching, I should say, that could be, who make money in both parties by pushing forth this divisive kind of a feel. And
Of
there's people in the
course.
media. So, yeah, exactly,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So,
Precisely.
so, so it's our job to stand up, speak out. It's kind of what we have to do because journalists' job was their job too. But a lot of those people have been, they're hired and fired based upon what they say, and if they
Definitely.
don't say what, yeah, so people like you and me are still out there, and we're still fighting for our passions, which are human beings, right? So it's a good thing.
Definitely. Absolutely. And you hit another great point that, you know, a narcissist or sociopath, they'll claim that they are a victim when they're actually victimizing many people at the same time, or millions like Hitler. So you're victimizing people, but they play the victim, and that's where it gets really scary. So yeah, it's just important that we stand. This is part of the reason why it's on my show, because like you just said, a lot of people don't know about these personality disorders, and they take a lot of abuse for many years and without realizing what's happening to them. And it's like mental torture, and it really messes with your head. And narcissistic abuse is one of the worst types of abuse that exists, because gaslighting and all of these mind tricks and making you think you're crazy and questioning your own reality, it's a lot of brainwashing and a lot of gaslighting. So it gets pretty scary. But one more thing that I wanted to say, you know, this is how I'm looking at you. Like Hitler had millions of followers, and Jesus had 12. And I'm not trying to get all religious on anybody here. I'm more on the spiritual side, but I think that's a beautiful message, because even if you only have a few followers, you're still doing the right thing. It doesn't, even if people are opposing you or not on board yet, you still got to push out your message of love and healing and stop the hate. You know what I mean? So just wanted
Totally
to
agree
say,
with you. Totally agree. That's a beautiful message. Yeah. So yeah, you
I've
got,
heard.
like you said, you got a handful of people versus a mass following, and you're right. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter about the numbers of people who follow you. It's more
Yep.
about the things you're doing for other human beings, and what your beliefs are, and what you're actually doing to make everyone better, rather than, like you said earlier, the narcissist and the sociopath and psychopath goes out and hurts many, 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 many people, and don't even realize they're doing this. And they think they're pious and spiritual in a lot of instances. It's
Yes,
really amazing.
absolutely. It's insane. So I
And they
don't know
can
how much
recruit quite well.
they can recruit.
Yeah, they recruit quite well. The
Oh, of
the
course.
narcissists, and yeah, they'll recruit you all day long. Not you or me, right? But you understand, they'll recruit people all day long
Not us.
because great victim status, this great message of, I have authority, I know what's going on, everyone follow me, even though I'm going in the wrong direction, right? And preaching hate.
Yes.
But in people would just block, just, wow, this guy is so charismatic, he knows what he's doing, he seems really victimized, and he knows we're all victimized, and we're going to follow him straight into the inferno, right?
Exactly. It's true, It's scary, but unfortunately it's the duality of the world that we live in. You have the good and the evil. You have the love and the hate still. So one day we can just, hope for world peace, but unfortunately we do have that other dark side still. I'm
True.
not saying everybody's perfect either, but you know what I mean. Like, there are people who really, really do love others and try to be there for them. And then there's other people who are literally just out for themselves. And it's completely opposite
Agreed.
of the way things should be. So back to the film stuff because I love this. I love the. Okay, so let me just tell the audience. So the film is called Operation Resist. And James, can you tell them where they can find that film?
Yes. Okay. So you can find it on Amazon.com if you live in the United States or United Kingdom. Otherwise, we're going to be staggering releasing it out to the rest of the world throughout the rest of this year. So if you can't get it through the United States or United Kingdom, especially with everybody locked down, then just wait for it. It'll be coming out. Pencil it down on a piece of paper right now. Look for it. It should be coming out eventually into your area. So, and we would have
Excellent.
had it out sooner, but we've literally had to fight through an enormous number of challenges from literally people who are exactly what we've been describing. So,
Huh. Wow. Well, it hasn't stopped you, so that's the most important thing. But yeah, those things happen anyway. Things get held up in that industry regardless, so obviously that much more with the type of content that you put out. So it makes sense, but I'm excited for the masses to see it. So what kind of projects are you considering next?
next projects, I have them listed, by the way, on our website, www.ethosmovies.com. Of course, the name
Excellent.
ethos is always, a lot of people like that because it's an old Greek name. It actually means the idea of how a society and its morale or morals are based upon literally an artistic standpoint. And a lot of people don't know that literally in music, for example, they had like all these different, they believed it was kind of interesting because I think we probably see it as a little medieval, but they kind of believed that these different modes had a certain effect on you, et cetera. And they had like the Lydian and the Phrygian and the Dorian modes and so forth. But they literally felt that like the power, but I think they captured that the power of the arts, the power that the arts have, can literally transform a society from the standpoint of like a very kind and gracious nation versus a very Nazi, murderous nation, right? So I think that there is some truth in that we as the arts community have we have a responsibility to the community to get the right message out to people and not just make a buck off of people. But
Definitely.
yeah, www.ethosmovies.com projects tab, and it will tell you kind of some of the upcoming. And I can kind of give you highlights if you wanted that. I'm not sure how much time you have left here.
Oh, I have a half an hour more, so it's up to you how much time you have. So I would
Okay,
love to hear
perfect.
about. I love the name, by the way. That's such an amazing concept, and I have heard that word before, but I don't know if I ever knew the intricate details of its meaning. So that's amazing.
Well, hey, thank you. And yeah, so basically the gist of it, and I'll give you what kind of, I can't give it too much because then you're giving away the whole right kit.
Of
But
course.
the basic gist of it is I like to write in a way that it's a very allegorical type of film. And the film that the next two films that are coming up had that allegorical feel to it. And what I mean by that is if you've ever seen allegories, and I think we can all see whether you agree with certain people's worldviews or not, you'll see an allegory like Pilgrim's Progress, which Liam Neeson, that was one of his first films, or you see a piece like Lord of the Rings, in which this obviously taken the world by storm in a lot of ways, that has an enormous amount of metaphor to it, as well as Star Wars. And when you look at those type of movies, a lot of people see, even like Star Trek TV series, they see the depth of the philosophy behind it, right? That someone's teaching something there that's beyond just, what the story is. And I think we look at
Right.
movies like that as great, as epic, at least from a literary standpoint and from a craft standpoint. And that's kind of how I have conceived my next three projects, especially the next two, which are rooted more in contemporary society, but have a very, very allegorical feel to them, and a lot of history and depth and so forth behind the scenes that you don't see. Um, and the basic gist of it, the next couple of films being to deal with this whole thing as a global community of love, and how that looks, and dealing with a lot of the stuff that goes on in the world, and some of the dark corridors, and that's going to be really interesting to the public. The dark corridors that are back there, and I think some people probably don't want those lights turned on, but always interesting to explore that, and without getting yourself killed, of course, right? Because it's important to let people know, kind of, this is how, we are challenged today. What are we going to do about it? So go out into your communities and make a difference so we can change things. And I think that's kind of where you get humanitarian feel there again, because I think you and I can't shut that off, right? I know you, Jessica, have that same desire, right? But I'm going to say it's probably going to be a lot closer to like a Jason Bourne or a Laura Croft or the James Bond type feel from the standpoint of plot, but from the standpoint, or even Tom Cruise Fallout, right? That kind of thing. But from the standpoint of actual depth behind it, it's going to have a humanitarian feel. So
that's amazing.
Can't stop the feeling, right?
We actually can't. And you know what? It just dawned on me that we need to work together. Like, what are we thinking?
There you go.
We should
exactly
put this humanitarian heart to combine and come up with something very, very powerful. That's amazing. Yeah. So do you have partners in those projects already? Do you bounce ideas off of each other? Is it like a collaboration type of situation, or are these pretty much your ideas?
At the conceptual level, when I'm first pushing this out, it's me crafting, because quite honestly, I'm a writer, director, producer, and the thing I love most, and the thing which I've been told I'm best at doing, whether that's true or not, is writing. But needless to say, I actually love writing. It's what I feel in the depths of my soul. It's like
Wow.
and I think we all get that, right? Because the creator, right, likes to create, right? Well, we like to create, so we tend to be, at least some of us, right? The artistic crowd, we love to create, so it's kind of like in our DNA. And I don't.
I'm with you on that. I've done from the acting to the production, and writing is absolutely hands down my thing, So I feel you on that 100%. But yeah, I think that it does come down to creative people. We love to give birth to ideas or imagery or sounds or stories, So
Yeah.
it's a beautiful process for me, and I see that with, all creative people. So it's really all about that process, and it's such a therapeutic process for people like us as well.
Oh, agree. I think, I don't know about. I'm going to tell you what I think I'm doing in that craft, and I'm interested to hear if that's what you do as well. And that is, I feel like I do the craft so that I can try to make a difference by how I write, by what I write, right? So it's more than just entertainment. Is that kind of what you do too? Like you're writing, but you're always trying to really, in the back corridors of that script, make a difference.
Absolutely. There's an objective with, changing the narrative. Absolutely. And there's also the feeling of, how do I evoke the most emotion from my audience? So with those two things in mind, I know that I'm going to probably put, yeah, how do I describe it? This is interesting. I've actually never had to describe this process in this type of way, but changing the narrative is absolutely what you just said, yes. And also, how do I evoke the most emotion? Because I know from my history in brand development and hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming that everybody in this world, they make decisions based on emotion, no matter who you are. So they might think they're making a logical decision, but at the end of the day, the way that you sway people towards a positive cause is by making them feel something. So I try to use that for good, So, yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Always trying to make a difference is, to me, the underlying heart of my craft. So I get that, and I'm glad you feel the same way. But I think there's also that craft side too, where you and I both like. So okay, like I mentioned earlier, two tools of screenwriting, right? So you've got the hero, you've got the passion that they're trying to achieve. You have all these conflicts. And one of the things that I noticed, which is really quite interesting, is that the really greats actually know how to create the most intelligent conflicts with the most intelligent resolutions. So what that does not look like is that someone sees there's a roadblock ahead, runs out there, removes the roadblock, and keeps driving. I mean, that's not really, catchy, right? That's not something people are going to be talking about later, after the film for many years. But I think when you find that perfect conflict where, wow, the guy is, trapped in an iron tomb in the middle of the ocean, and he has no keys on the inside, right?
Yeah.
But he used to be an apprentice to Harry Houdini, and right, so how you come up with that, right? And that intelligent conflict, intelligent resolution, I think, is one part of describing you as a writer and a filmmaker.
That's amazing and very interesting. Yeah. So how long do you feel that you need to start the next project after going through everything you just went through with this last one? Because I know it was probably very draining on certain levels. Very rewarding, but draining probably, like all of the red tape, let's call it, that you had to go through. So what's a sufficient amount of time for you to recharge?
I'd say a year and a quarter of my life was taken, and I'm not complaining, but it was taken from doing this humanitarian effort because of all the assaults. And because of that, I think that it's going to take me some time to regroup, a little slower than what I thought I was going to be able to do. And then when COVID-19 hit as well, that's just more punches in the throat, right?
Yes.
So it's slowing us down even more. However, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be at a standstill. I mean, we could pop up and, like the phoenix from the ashes could come up very quickly or so. But what we do know is that we can start planning out a lot of stuff now, regardless, and get that. And I really found it's the best way to approach any film. So for any filmmakers listening out there, I think what you have to know is this, and this is, by the way, what I did in my last movie, is that you don't sit around with your foot on the ground waiting for everything to happen, okay? As soon as I heard that was happening, I immediately went to write the script. That's before I even thought about using that humanitarian fund. I just said, I've got to do something. And I went out and started writing. And I think that's the key. And I think that's what you have to do, is you have to get up and you have to start working. And you start working at your dream. You don't sit down and keep dreaming. You got to get up and you have to start working, and you start moving, and suddenly you'll find things start happening and people start helping and doors start opening and it's really great. I mean, I've been able to talk to some really wonderful people around the world, actually, from LA to China, about amazing possibilities in the future. And would be great to work with different people from around the world in the future. And I already have a vast array of talent who I've been connected to throughout all these challenges, throughout even COVID-19. I'm continuing to push forward. So I'm not letting it stop me, right? And I think that's what you have to do, is keep pushing forward.
I love that. And I posted something about that today on my Facebook. It said if you don't come out of COVID-19 with another skill, and I don't know what else, but basically, this is, I mean, for us especially, right? Because we're writers. But, I started this radio show under these circumstances. I'm writing a new book for another contact of mine. I have another feature film that I'm writing with a partner who's a singer, songwriter, rapper from Canada. So I'm like, the same as you where I'm like, well, I'm stuck at home, so I'm just going to create stuff. you know, as many
Love it.
as many yeah, because that way when the world comes to life again, I have things to launch, right? So, yeah,
Exactly.
you got to take the steps. People I'm a very big picture person on one hand, but I also get that everything you do day to day is what creates your big picture. So yeah, you got to put in the effort. You have to make the moves. Have the vision, but make the moves. So I think that's great advice. So one more time, wherever you can, tell our audience where they can find you. What's the best way if you want people to find you on social media or to find your film? Before we wrap this up, I just wanted to give you that platform to basically announce whatever it is that you would like to announce.
Thank you so much, Jessica, first of all, for having me on your show. I greatly appreciate it. It's very kind
Thank
of you.
you.
Thank you for your heart for humanity making a difference. I greatly appreciate that as well. I know that mankind may not always appreciate it, but there's a lot of people out there who do. And so I wanted to say
Thank
that.
you.
And as far as finding
Thank you.
us out there, yes, ma'am. In www.ethosmovies, ETHOS, right? Ethosmovies.com is our website. If you go to Facebook, we have a Facebook page called Ethos Movies. We also have James Moran, James Moran, Facebook page as well. We have Twitter, which is Ethos Movies. We have Instagram, which is ethos.movies. So we have a lot of presence out there in social media. And we used to have Google Plus, but that got kind of canned by Google, didn't it?
Yes,
But yeah. And that way you can follow us, especially on our website. And our Facebook page is quite active, and the other Instagram as well. So when we actually have stuff going on, we tend to post a lot out there. So when we are starting to push out to other countries, you'll see that out there. So be sure to follow us.
That's amazing. I'm glad that you announced that so people can find you, find your film, and I really appreciate you being on the show and telling your story, all the ups and downs, talking about your film. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the audience took away a lot of insight today too, so that's amazing. But yeah, we can have you on again anytime. I'm sure there's a lot of topics we could discuss because we're so similar.
Absolutely. Look forward to working with you, Jessica.
Thank you. You too. Take care, James.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
You as well. You as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, guys, we're going on about a 15-minute break, and then we'll be back with Jen Garcia.